Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and today I just want to talk about Bill Butler. Every year I do one of these podcasts where I talk about Bill. For those who don't know, Bill was was the co-founder of Bedrock Games. He and I used to be co-owners of Bedrock Games, and I think we must have established it like 2009 or so, and he passed away in 2014 of a heart attack. So it's been like 11 years. Yeah, like 11 years, which is really, um, you know, surprising how that much time has gone by. And I try to do this every year, and every year I do something a little bit differently. Sometimes I'll just talk like I am today, where I'm just sort of reminiscing or whatever. And sometimes I'll do something special. I there's a series of books that I used to like, and I read one of the books last year. I was hoping to read one of them this year, but I didn't have a chance to. Um, but I'll try to do that next year because I would like to make that an ongoing thing. Um, Bill had very eclectic tastes, I would say, in movies and literature. He was very into obviously D&D and things like that, but he was also into like World War II magazines and had a lot of other areas of specialized interest. And he was into the books that the Remo Williams movies were based on. I think they were the Destroyer series. I don't have them in front of me, but again, I read one last year, and my understanding is they get really good by the third book, and they were pretty important for the development of the monk class in D&D, according to some people. So I'm hoping that I can maybe next year read one or two more of the books and kind of keep that going. I don't want to make it an every year thing, but I'd like to do that. But yeah, so I mean, again, it's been 10 years, and it's always surprising to me because it really does feel like this happened like not that long ago, because my markers are the books that we put out at different times. So we put out Sartorius the year he died. And then I started working on Wandering Heroes of Ogregate, and I think we released that like a couple years later in 2016, and that still feels like a new game to me, like we just put it out. And so that newness is sort of, so it doesn't feel like it's been that long since Bill passed away to me, because it just feels like it feels like he died not that long ago, and then we just kind of started working on Ogregate, and then you turn around and it's been all these years. He was very instrumental for establishing a lot of the principles that we continue to design by. And I use, like, I have, how can I put this? Bill had a very streamlined set of sensibilities when it comes to game design. He liked things to be clean. He was a big improver, he used to like to say. So if he had a system that he liked, he would always fix it and adjust it and try to make it a little bit more smooth around the edges and just make sure all the parts fit together better. And he liked to do that, with games that he was running, but he also wanted our games to be that way. And so I have sensibilities that are maybe a little bit more ungainly. And, something that I've tried to maintain since he passed away was, that aspect of the design philosophy. And so, and I think, and again, with better and worse results depending on, certain books, whatever, like sometimes I've been good at intuiting what Bill would want. Sometimes I haven't been. But I always try to go back to that baseline. So every once in a while I'll try to work on a game where I really bring things down to like a very streamlined level. And so like right now we're working on a like a sect management thing, and that's sort of always in the back of my mind, because as I'm working on it, I'm realizing this is maybe a little bit more elaborate than Bill would have allowed for. So I'm always thinking of ways that I can sort of pare it down and simplify it so that it's not getting into that sort of over-engineered state. But yeah, so, and again, I think, I don't know if I ever talked about, I may have. It's been, because I've done a number of these now, and it's not like I remember every single time I do it, so I'm probably treading a lot of the same ground. But again, my plan is to keep doing these because I think it's important, since he was instrumental in founding Bedrock. He was also just like a really close friend. He and I would have conversations almost every day about things we were working on and game mechanics in general, and these would usually be Like, you know, if I had to go to the store to get my wife some coffee or something, I'd call Bill and we'd talk, and I'd end up hanging out in the parking lot before I even went in to get my coffee because we were talking so long. And we just had like a lot of those kinds of conversations. So and not just games, like, you know, he would come over, we would watch movies, things like that. So you know, and we knew each other since I want to say just before 2000. I don't remember the exact time that I met Bill, but I remember I was running a game. I was running a Ravenloft game, and he was a friend of a friend. And I remember he showed up, and he looked almost like a repair guy for some reason. I don't remember what it was about. I don't know if that's what he. I know Bill worked with copy machines. I don't remember what his job was at this point. When he passed away, he was working at a copy center in a university, I believe, which actually was a very useful skill for him to have, because when you do POD printing, POD is kind of like it's like a really high level copy machine almost in some respects, and so, or at least like the kind that you would use at a copy center, where maybe you're putting documents in from a file, and so he was able to kind of like when we would get guidelines on things, he was very able to sort of assess them in a way that would say, oh, I know what this means and why they're doing that. And so it was very helpful. And also, you know, he knew how to, like, you know, if we wanted to print a book at a copy center, he knew what options to choose and all those things, because sometimes we would have to do that if we were making prototypes. But anyways, when he showed up, he looked kind of like when I, like, towards the end, he had like a more of a shaggy hairdo and a beard. But when I first met him, he had like a very 1950s style hairdo, like very short, and he was like very clean shaven. He looked kind of like a repair guy, so he looked kind of like, you know, somebody from like the 50s or something, you know. And that's not too far from his personality. He was kind of like a very salt of the earth guy, and he had my understanding is his parents were older, and so I think he did have there was something very traditional about Bill, not like in a politically conservative way or anything like that, or you know, anything to do with politics at all, but just in terms of his personality and how he dealt with people and things like that. He was kind of like a throwback in a lot of ways, and that was something that I liked about him. And so, you know, I think I was running a Ravenloft game, and I remember he showed up, and then we just kind of clicked. And, you know, he was in my campaigns, and I was in a lot of his campaigns after that. We were in a bunch of groups together. But he was also somebody who gave me like pivotal advice when I would run Ravenloft. And again, I apologize if I'm a little low key today. I'm just very under the weather, so that's why this sounds this way. But when I would run Ravenloft, I kind of ran a hybrid style, because Ravenloft is not meant to be run the way that I say I run like Ogre Gate or any of other games. It's meant to be run a little bit more cinematically, or at least a little bit more with story as a core component. But when it came to how I adjudicated the game, I generally kind of allowed things to go in any direction. I wouldn't say it was a sandbox, but it could go in any direction. I didn't really care what direction the combats went. I wasn't steering anything. And there was a fight with I don't remember the bad guy in this scenario, but there was some kind of lich-like bishop that they were fighting. He might have been a human. I can't remember. He wasn't a lich, but he was at least a necromancer or something, or a evil priest. Again, I don't remember the specifics. But in the battle, the characters had sort of cornered the villain in a church and ended up forcing him to run away, but he had no place to retreat, so he had to try to get through a stained glass window. And they ended up finishing him off with like some crossbow bolts as he was sort of halfway through the window. So it was very, in a way, it was a little bit goofy, a little bit anticlimactic, and not very dignified. And so I remember, and I didn't think too much of it, but I was probably, as a GM, I would have probably been like, I wish it had gone another way. And I remember Bill told me after that was one of the things he loved about that campaign, was that I didn't interfere with the natural flow of combat, and I allowed it to play out that way, kind of logically from the dice rolls and how the NPC would react. And I didn't nerf anything. I didn't fudge anything. I didn't do anything to sort of tip the scales of the outcome. And that was really helpful advice for me, because that was something where it's like, you get a lot of feedback when you're a GM, but that was feedback that was one of the most useful pieces of feedback I ever got from a person. And it kind of keyed me into something that was useful about my GM style. And so again, that was just just one example. And yeah, it's very difficult to believe it's been 11 years. And it's also I don't know, when we started Bedrock, you would hear stories of people who were working on D&D were like early partners and passed away during the early phases of development or something like that. But I never expected Bill to pass away that young. He was quite young when he died. He was only, I think, 46, which is younger than I am now. And so now I really appreciate how young that was. At the time, because he was older than me, so at the time, I didn't fully appreciate how young that was. Like, I knew it was young, but I didn't fully appreciate it. Now I really appreciate. It would have just been great if he had more time. And also I do recall towards the end, I was getting the sense that he was kind of pushing me to get things through the system. When we were making Sartorius, I remember we had an early, I won't get too into it, but there was an issue with one of the borders, and we could have gone back and fixed it. It wouldn't have been a huge deal. But he was just like, no, let's just get it out. And so, which was fine too. It looked fine. It's just that there was like a thing that we would have liked to have revised a little bit. And that, by the way, that happens anytime you make a book. That's just part of making books. And normally we would have taken another couple of weeks, revised it, but I could tell he was very impatient to have that one come out. And so, and I know he always wanted a fantasy game. So, so I think I had like a little bit of a sinking feeling in the lead up to it. But I still was not expecting when I got the message, one of his friends texted me. I was not expecting it at all. And I was not, I was not expecting it. Like, if something like that happened, I would have thought it would not have been as catastrophic as it was. And so, and then so that I got the message, and I went down to the hospital, and I was actually the second person there. So they didn't have me go in and see him. They just, explained to me what happened, because somebody else knew him had already gone in. And the thing that's odd about those kind of situations is they explain it to you, and then you have all these questions after you leave, and you can't go back and ask them the questions. So, but it was a very big shock when he passed away. And my understanding is, that he was at the very least there were people with him when it happened. And I won't go into the details because I don't want to disclose those. It's nothing embarrassing or anything like that. I just want to be respectful. But yeah. So again, I like I said, I wasn't feeling very well today, so this was one of the harder ones to do. But I wanted to make sure I did it because I think it's important. Every year to remember Bill and to remember the role he had at Bedrock. It's just one of those things where I think there's always a danger that you just kind of lose connection with things like this. You know what I mean? And so and Bill was like a very important person in my life, so I don't want to lose that kind of connection. But yeah, so I think. If I'm able to, next time, what I'd like to do, and I usually don't like to Google while I'm doing these things, but I want to make sure I get the name of the series correct so I can give people a heads up on when I'm going to do this. So yeah, it's the Destroyer series. What I think I would like to do is maybe next time, what I might do is I might read book 2 and 3, because what I've been told is the third book is where it gets really good. And Bill was like in love with these books. I think he read all of them. And it's a huge series. It goes on. Like I can try to find the list. I think it's one of those series where there's so many they lost count. But like just looking at the Wikipedia entry, it's 155 books, which is a lot. And they're not usually that long. They're kind of like, like they're almost like James Bond style novels. But that's a lot of books. And I don't know if it's one of these series that got. I can't imagine that the original writers wrote all 155. They must have turned it into a thing after a while. But he was a huge fan. He used to talk about all the plot points, and I always got the plot points from Bill, so it was very interesting for me last year getting the first novel and actually experiencing it directly for myself. And again, I had seen the movie before, but I had kind of forgotten about it, so I watched the movie again as well. And I think so. Yeah, so it looks like the next book is Death Check, and the third one is Chinese Puzzle. And I think Chinese Puzzle is, and I could be wrong, but I keep hearing that around that book is when the series kind of crystallizes and finds its real shape. So maybe what I'll do is I'll read Death Check and Chinese Puzzle. And if anybody's read these books and has any thoughts on, which ones I should read, you'd let me know. Like if it's like if it's better just to jump around, and maybe I'll do that. But yeah, I think that's, it's kind of one. And also I might start, I might try to do something at some point too, where we maybe talk about games Bill liked, because there was very specific role-playing games that he enjoyed. One that I know off the top of my head, I'd have to go back and try to remember all the others, because there were a few. But the one that I always remember him being very fond of was Dragon Age, the tabletop RPG, because he likes the computer game, and he got the tabletop game, and he was very fond of the mechanics in it, and especially the critical hit mechanics in it. So yeah, so again, I just wanted to pop in and pay my respects to Bill, and I'll post this up, and people can, if you want to leave any well wishes, feel free. I'm sure a lot of people listening probably actually knew Bill, so feel free to comment if you did. And yeah, so until next time, I will talk to you later.